I have to say, okay. Hi. Hey.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Good.
Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
Uh,
We're
I'm
not
not
live yet, are we?
sorry.
We're not
No,
live yet. No.
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 I'll let you know before we are.
Okay.
Uh, people get in the waiting room anyway, and I let them in, so things don't start until I say they do, which is great. Yeah. So I'm not sure how much you know about internet intellect or how these work.
A little bit, but I had some questions, or I figured you'd tell me.
Uh, Basically, the thing to know is about our membership is
Mhm.
committed, intense. Sometimes, because these are recorded, there's a lot of people who watch asynchronously. So
Yeah.
sometimes we have like one person in the Zoom and then tons of people watch it after. Sometimes we have tons of people in the Zoom asking questions. So it's something between a podcast recording and a salon, depending on the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. Yeah.
So yeah, but if you have other questions, I hope I can answer them.
Maybe just like informally, what makes for, in your experience, like what makes for a good inter-intellect
Uh,
session?
so what I like to do in mine is basically get into the what makes good art questions.
Mhm.
So to talk about process and to have a few general questions, especially because our audience may or may not be familiar with a given writer's work, and then sort of around the halfway point, getting a little bit more theoretical. I'd say that most of our viewers tend to be from the sort of slightly tech adjacent, very interested in the
Yeah.
humanities from the perspective of people who have more mostly experienced in STEM, which I am not. So it's been really interesting kind of seeing that needle be threaded. So in terms of what I'm sort of personally interested in,
Mhm.
I'm basically interested in the question of what makes great art and sort of how does that dovetail with uh, examinations of people's desire to make art being bound up in desires to outdo one another and I'm interested in kind of your views on the industry, the theater industry, and
Yeah.
what's doing well
Yeah.
and perhaps what it's doing badly. So I think nothing very surprising, but I'm looking forward to a fair bit of back and forth.
Yeah.
And then the audience could literally do or say anything. Again, sometimes we have no one asking questions. Sometimes someone will halfway through have a very intense question. Technically, I'm supposed to ask you things for the first hour or so, and then
Yeah.
people are sort of encouraged the last half hour is audience Q&A. Uh, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes people have very burning questions, but basically, we're responsive to them. And the best, I think some of the best salons are those that become conversations.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had one with Anastasia Berg and Rachel Wiseman at the point last week of what are children for? Should So everyone just started talking about whether they should have children or not, which was
Yeah.
and their parents. I will not be asking you about your parents, but who knows? We can go anywhere.
Who knows? Yeah.
So yeah, I enjoyed reading your plays very much. I have not seen any of them.
Been reading
I think,
your
oh,
That's
awesome.
you. Yeah, so we've been trading.
Excellent. Yes, I have mine on in PDF only, I'm afraid.
Oh no, I should. Oh, that's
Oh
terrible.
no, no, I was traveling, so I asked for PDFs because I
Which
was
one did you get? Which
I
PDF
got
did
everything and I read Times Square and Zoomers before today, and
Okay.
look forward to reading the rest in due course.
Yeah.
But really enjoyed them. Have lots of very specific questions. Hope to uh be able to show up in person now that I'm sort of out of various book deadlines.
Yeah, where are you in the
I'm
world
in
of
New
it?
York.
Okay, yeah, I
I
think you should come. I think you'd really like Morning Journal, which is really, really different than the current play. Um, I'll forward it to you. Just it's um got a real like it's got like a really religious dimension to it, but that's hard to explain, but
I
it's definitely a kind of it has a mystical sort of non-internet
I'm
uh
very curious. Yeah, I'd love to read
component.
that. It's where so are you still in New York? Is that
Yeah, I'm actually at the beach right now. I'm
oh
at my fiance's family friend's beach house
oh awesome.
um,
Where
in the Hamptons. I mean,
oh
nothing that
lovely.
I could afford, but under normal, but it's a special. gift of a few days.
Oh,
So
that's really lovely. Yes, I
mhm.
am here in my apartment attempting. You can't hear the AC, can you? Because it's very, very loud, and I
No,
can't.
I can't. Zoom's
Good.
pretty good at filtering.
I did the last salon with the AC off and suffered for it. So,
Yeah.
but,
Where in New York are you?
I'm Upper East Side.
So am I.
Oh, wait, where are you?
73rd and 3rd.
Oh, I'm 87th between First and York.
Okay. Yeah,
So
we'll have to
yeah,
get coffee in the neighborhood.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's it's I grew up around here. I'm about a 20-minute walk from where I grew up and a 5-minute walk from where I went to elementary school. So
Oh, cool. I'm a tutor by day sometimes. Where did you go to high school? So I know,
so I went Chapin when I was very small, then
okay,
Hunter, then homeschooling, then Exeter. But
makes a lot
Chapin
of
is just
sense.
around
Yeah.
the way, so I see all the like small children in their uniforms, and the terrifying preteens in their uniforms, who are a little more intimidating.
My first job out of college was the debate coach at Spence, and that was
Oh, wow.
shocking. Like a well, it was definitely
It's real.
uh, a real culture shock. Because I'm not from the Upper East Side, and I was also dating a woman from who went to Trinity at the time. She'd gone to Trinity and was at Harvard, and her friends like really gave me the cold shoulder. I really did not understand
It's a
the
weird world.
yeah.
I'm very
Now I
glad I left. I liked Hunter better. I was very happy at Hunter. But then we moved my mom, half Italian, we were back to
Mhm.
Italy,
Oh
hence
wow.
the homeschooling. But I feel like I have sort of moral support for Hunter, whereas Chapin still sort of terrifies me a little bit. But
Yeah, I mean Hunter's I've had a few Hunter students and they're known friends who've gone to Hunter, and yeah, it's a completely different world. Well, it's merit based.
yes,
And not just merit, it's not even merit as much as like a kind of mental acuity
yeah. And
stand.
everyone at Hunter was very weird in a wonderful way. And I think to this day,
Yeah,
if
you
anyone,
code as more Hunter than Chapin, I think.
thank you. I'll take that
I
as a
don't know how you take that, but
very with I would be worried if the reverse were true.
yeah.
I did have my 15-year reunion. I did go to my Chapin reunion just to see it. Everyone was very sweet. And I was and not at all what I expected.
Yeah.
But I think it was 420, so I think maybe everyone was just mellow for other
Hmm.
reasons. But fabulous.
Yeah.
So and congratulations on your engagement.
Yeah. Thanks. It's the one. Once you get engaged, then it's all anyone ever. Okay, go to a party and all of a sudden
Yeah.
it's all anyone. I think people have repeated. I think it's just like such a good icebreaker for people who are only kind of barely my friend. Like I think for the next like 5 years, I'll be.
Yeah.
And then they have the marriage to look forward to, so they can say congratulations on that. And then it has a lot of legs.
My husband and I skipped the first one. We were a pandemic elopement, so we went straight to with
I'm
no
jealous.
engagement.
Yeah,
However, we did yesterday just run into someone
that's
that
much
we hadn't
better.
seen since before the pandemic. So 4.5 years into marriage, we got I think this is the last, we got someone's a congratulation on your marriage, which,
That's
uh,
huge.
you
40.
know, I was like, so you've got so much time, so
Yeah.
many things to look forward to. At least 4 years into your marriage, people
Well, I
still
just read in your book that what in the 50s, what the crazy percentage of people were married at 20? I just read it.
oh my goodness, what did I say? I cannot remember. I wrote that book
I
5
don't
years.
know if you said it as much as you reported someone else saying it, but
Okay.
yeah, something like a really shockingly high percentage of 20-year-olds were married in the 50s. You're married by 20 in the 50s. It's the chapter where you're talking about like Protestant mainline dominance and yeah. And then by 1970, it's completely gone basically. But I don't know, it's good. It's a good narrative.
It's yes, I'm now sort of pondering this because of last week's sort of child rearing salon. The sort of numbers of people interested in having, so marriage is already sort of in decline, but I think it's actually having children that's sort of going to be the next big uh, predict. There's a sort of very, very noticeable bifurcation that I'm sort of
Yeah.
also anecdotally aware of in New
Well, yeah.
York.
There's like marriage is sort of like a thing you do for people you've been dating for a long, like among millennials, it's like the might as well get married group. There's the like white collar status marriage,
Yeah.
which is all about the times right up in the money on the wedding, like, and then there are there then there's everything else. But
And what's
um
interesting is how much of marriage is as a capstone is not like it's pretty sort of cross social class in a way that's really interesting. Fun fact. So there's a lot of sort of data on like working class couples who have children, but
mhm.
one of the reasons they don't get married is the sense that marriage is for when you've made it or when you're stable or when you're stable for a wedding, such that there's a sort of
That's
uh,
my attitude.
yeah, it's like, you know, this sense that marriage is somehow an accomplishment or an achievement that comes after various other forms of success like holds true even if like you're already living with someone, even if you already have children with someone in a way that's really yeah been an interesting phenomenon for social scientists to discuss.
Hmm.
So yeah, I will say the pandemic elopement very cheap wedding, uh
Yeah,
strongly recommend.
yeah, I'm
I realize
looking. I'm definitely. I'm very open to that advice.
Well, if you
Um,
get married in Central Park, as I now know, with under 25 people, you do not need a permit, and you can do it for free. So that is as this is how we ended up doing it on March 21st, 2020.
mhm.
Uh, but there you go. You know, I have other friends planning weddings and being terrified at the costs, and it is this fun fact. I don't know if anyone's going to take me up on it, because one of the good parts about eloping in a pandemic is no one's mad at you, because they weren't invited to your wedding, including in my case, my own mother. I imagine that's harder now, but who knows? Let's see this.
Are you planning on having kids? Do you have kids?
We don't have kids. Planning eventually, but my husband is tenure track, and that is a conversation we are waiting until after the
Mhm.
tenure decision, so a couple years down the line. But
Wow.
yeah, kids. I like kids. I think I would like one. I'm not sure where in the small New York City apartment we would put it.
I
Uh,
know.
that's down the line. It's fine.
I know.
My mom just sort of turned a walk-in closet in her studio apartment into a second bedroom. So um it's
Yeah.
not great for ventilation. I did wake up gasping a few times, but you know, the location was great right at the park. So where did you grow up?
Bethlehem, PA. So
Awesome.
not far, but culturally very far. 65 miles, but like further.
How long have you been in New York?
Uh, since I was 23, 22. Why am I saying 23 when I was 22? So 12, I would think 13 years now. I'm 35, so
Oh
a
wow.
long time.
Someone is just attempting to go into the waiting room. Uh
Yeah.
they
Do you know what the numbers? Do you have the numbers in advance?
I don't, and they're always kind of random anyway because people will not sign up and then show up. What has happened is someone appeared in the waiting room and has now vanished. Ah, there we go.
Okay. Do you know what
Someone's
the range? What is the range? What's this, may I ask, what's the smallest or the biggest you've?
the smallest I've had is 1, and the biggest is 20,
Okay.
25. I've got 2 in the waiting. Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Hello.
Good. Hi. So yes, now is the part where, as we vamp for time and people slowly trickle in, we all, should we wish, say where we're dialing in from and our names and other fun facts. So, Alex, where are you dialing in from today?
Yeah, I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
Awesome.
Yeah, what about you guys?
New York City.
Normally New York City, but the beach for the day.
The beach. Which beach?
Um, the Hamptons, which sounds like I can afford to live in the Hamptons, but it's my fiance's family's friend's house. So it's way out of my pay grade,
Hey, you played something right.
but I played some. Yeah, it's called getting married to the right person. But no,
Exactly.
it's not. Yeah. Um, It's her mom's best friend's house, basically. So they're very nice, very, very nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's a nice reprieve. Tara, that is quite the background. Looks like
it is
you're
a
in
nice-
like the most magical like lair.
No, I look at me. I have this like weird
Yeah.
and
Thank you very much.
as
Yes, I
bland as
designed it myself.
possible.
It is my writing space needs to be maximalist. It's somehow I find it easier to concentrate. Oh, why is there? When there's just a million objet d'art everywhere. So, oh, so hello, Michael. Hello, Eden. Hello, Eloy. If anyone wants to sort of say hello and where you're coming in from today, feel free. We're all going to be sort of introducing ourselves a little bit until around 6:03 or so, and then we'll get started. I know some of you, I've seen some of you at Interintellects and events in person. That was you, Eloy. I've seen you in person.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I think that I was. Hi, Tara.
Hello. Welcome. You're in DC, is that right?
Yes, I'm in DC. I'm in DC. And thank you so much. Actually, like, I think I'm gonna be able to I'm gonna publish the short story that you prompted.
Oh, that's wonderful. Excellent.
Well, thank you, teacher. Thank you, teacher.
Excellent. We did a fiction writing workshop back in April. So, oh, that's so wonderful. I'm so glad you did that. Fantastic. All right. So I think let's get started now. As ever, hi everybody. Welcome to Interintellect. I know I've seen some of you before, some of you I haven't. Basically, the format of the evening is this. Matthew and I will talk for about 45 minutes. Just the two of us, but if you have a burning question, please feel to sort of raise your hand or ask it. Around 45 to 50 minutes into the conversation, we'll turn it to audience Q&A. At that point, feel free at any point to put a question into the chat, which I can refer to either during our conversation or in the audience Q&A. And then maybe if you want to sort of ask a question verbally, wait till later on in the session. So we'll be going until around 7:15, 7:30, depending on how many questions all of you have. But without further ado, Matt Gasda, I am delighted to have you with me. I really enjoyed reading your work. I've been following it for some time, and I've been very, very interested to get to see it live, because I'm imagining it's a different experience than reading the page. I would like to. Now I don't have deadlines. I can leave the house again.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start out by kind of asking you about a designation that you've used in some interviews about your work as hyperreal. You've talked about your plays as chamber dramas, and a lot of the most recent stagings have been in places, lofts, for example, that kind of bridge the gap between traditional proscenium theater and something interactive. Is this something that you would say is a sort of conscious choice for your work going forward, something you're interested in exploring right now? What does the hyperreal do for you as an artist?
So a couple questions there. I think conscious is an interesting it's an interesting question whether I'm conscious of what I'm doing. I mean, I think anyone who's worked in theater knows that necessity is like the necessity is everything. You can't consciously choose all the things you're doing, and the nature of like directing, producing, or writing a play, and every level of the production of the creation process involves like a lot of unconscious forces kind of intervening. So I think in the beginning, I've been writing and producing plays since 2015, 14, so 10 years. At first I had a mentor, and then pretty quickly I started working kind of self-producing completely by myself. And prior to being a playwright, I played in bands, so I had that, as I maybe probably mentioned in a lot of other interviews. So I had the instinct to just a band, you pick a venue or you find like a house to do a house show, and then you split the tickets and you split the cost of moving the gear or whatever. So it was pretty natural to me to do that. So I think it's both. It's both. It was both habit. In the beginning, it was necessity. I absolutely did not have the funds to rent a theater. I didn't have any institutional backing. That I didn't have deep-pocketed investors or producers. So even if I consciously wanted to produce a play, otherwise I wouldn't have produced a play, period. So it was either small DIY venues or nothing. And now, as I think my profile and my career, my career I've developed something that resembles an actual career. And so it increasingly becomes a conscious choice. It increasingly becomes an option. Again, I still don't have anything resembling like big money backing, but I think I guess if I really, I kind of, I'm beginning to understand that if I wanted to go and do a raise, I could do it to produce a play in a bigger venue. But I definitely don't have those instincts. I don't really desire that artistically. So it's really hard to separate my own tastes from what I learned to do and how I learned to create, how I learned to make plays. The signature of my plays is in many ways is the format, is many ways is the whole modality of experience. Now, the other way of looking at this is I think on the page my plays are very classical. I don't think of my writing itself as being like radically experimental or shocking or new. Like I think my own training was really academic. I wasn't a theater major or anything. I studied philosophy and English, and my own experience of theater was almost entirely on the page until I actually started doing theater. And secondarily, I really liked movies, so I wasn't a theater person. So I had more experience here reading plays, watching classic films, reading novels, and my plays are kind of constructed out of all of those elements. Or even I was more interested in classical music when I started writing plays than I was in theater. Theater was not really an interest. I didn't go to theater very much. I still don't. I can't because I'm going to my own place. I have to run my company, but I wasn't like a Broadway kid. I very rarely liked what I would see. So, yeah. In summary, I think there are like bits of consciousness or intention in the way that I work, but it's so there's the path is kind of set for me. So I've learned to enjoy necessity might be a wave. I've learned to enjoy what necessity makes me do.
So I had another question I was going to ask you, but before I ask you this, I now want to follow up on this. So you came into writing plays as someone who was not antecedently interested in writing plays.
No, right.
How did you start? Like, why did you start? What was it about the idea that you wanted to put into play format that struck you and made you say, all right, this is a medium, not classical music, not rock music or anything else. This needs to be on stage.
Yeah, I actually I was really interested in being I wanted to be a film director. I got very interested in film, and I got like my friends and I split the first version of the Blackmagic cinema camera, which is like I think a low end like digital movie camera. It was like the first like cheaper digital movie camera that like it came out like 11 years ago, and it was only a few $1,000s, and at the time that was like it was a lot, but it felt doable and it felt exciting, and I was making short films. But the thing about film that bothered me was that you couldn't I wasn't really I don't really do short things. Like I don't write short stories. I don't really write one acts. I don't have that instinct. My instinct is to have a 90-minute. My thought, the form of my like dramatic vision is whatever, conventional full length 92 minutes to 2 hours. I wasn't thinking, basically I wasn't thinking in terms of short stories. So yeah, I was writing novels at the time, or trying to. I was writing screenplays, interested really deeply in film. But there was no, I didn't have anywhere to go with those ambitions at the time. And I think just anecdotally, I was meeting a lot of people who were actors in New York. And I think because of those instincts of playing in a band, it just something kicked in with, oh, you know people who act and like acting, and it is possible to stage a 90-minute play in a way that it's not possible to make a 90-minute film for $1,000 or something. So I think in a way it was just the possibility was there. And then I think I'm not someone to ever think I can't, at least within the realm of like letters, I am inspired to try things that I don't have fluency in and don't have expertise in. I think I've always found just switching mediums to be something happens. Like with the first time you like try a medium, something exciting happens. So I think it was in my nature to think that I could. So I could and I did.
All right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm most curious about is kind of, so a bit of background for those of you who are watching at home who perhaps have missed some of the Dime Square discourse the past God, how many years has it been? I don't think about that. A lot of the kind of initial wave of public response to Dime Square, your play, also involved a kind of interest in chronicling a particular social scene, a particular place, a particular time, a particular vibe shift, one might say, of young artists. Maybe this is, and you can correct me if this is not a fair summation. Young artists who, during the COVID lockdowns, resisted both, let's say, some of the actual sort of lockdown mechanics, but more broadly, a sense of millennial social justice culture. So there's a sort of new wave of younger artists, like many waves of younger artists, questioning authority, questioning established norms, who were making art and having all of the sort of romantic and interpersonal drama that young artists tend to do in New York City in this time. And your play was written both about that scene, within that scene, cast members of that scene.
Yes.
Which is all to say, you perhaps may have found yourself cast in this role as a kind of chronicler of culture. And I'm curious, as a playwright, how much was your initial interest in chronicling particular people versus chronicling a culture versus using a culture, a subculture in which you were immersed to do something that was, let's say, not descriptive of that scene, but rather explore ideas of your own? How do you think of yourself as balancing a kind of reportage or cultural criticism or sense of the zeitgeist with the sense that any world you're in might illuminate different ideas beyond that you're interested in?
I mean, to be blunt, character is way more interesting to me than zeitgeist. I know I forgot to answer the hyperreal part, but I think that of your previous question, but I think it's sort of the same answers. I'm not like theoretically interested in doing something for the sake of it being hyperreal or for the sake of commenting on culture. If something evolves as like a second order effect of wanting to write a very classical play about well-defined characters, and you can frame that kind of classical core in a way that's I would say, or more experimental, or ground experimental is not really the right word, but meta theatrical or critical. In other words, if I can present the play, I can present the play in a way that gets people to think about their time and place and culture. That's fine, and that's good. But that's not the first layer that I'm enticed by as an artist. I think even Dime Square, which I think people assumed walking into the play or when they buy the play collection that it's going to be like just a series of tweets. I think they find something a little bit different. And certainly when we first started doing the play and it became this kind of huge thing, like, I mean, it just would sell out within minutes, and I'd get lots of messages about how to get tickets, and there was nothing else going on in New York at the time like it. I mean, theaters weren't even really reopened. So, I mean, admittedly, partly it was just because people were so bored. But I think one of the things I always heard, it's just people coming and saying, "Oh, this was a real play." Like people were spending $50 on tickets because they wanted to come see like some kind of bricolage of like memes, or like they were comfortable spending $50 to get some kind of self-referential bricolage of internet culture, and they were happy to have gotten a play, I think, but that wasn't even what they thought they were paying for. Like the play was almost a bonus. It felt like a lot of people were coming to just see themselves in the mirror, just to laugh at some kind of, I don't know. I can't even really put my finger on what it is. I mean, well, I'll find out if I have a book proposal kind of on this theme. I maybe should have sent it to you, Tara, before the interview, but I'll find out more about the fate of that book actually incredibly soon. Thankfully not today, because it would have been weird to have like signed on to this being like really happy or really unhappy. But it is something I'm thinking about, but I do think it's almost like it does feel like a book length question. At least the audience, the book length question is like, why do people need to filter our concrete individualized experiences through memes, through the internet, through like generalized archetypes, only to come back to themselves again? So as a playwright, and I know this is a really meandering answer, so forgive me, but as a playwright, the kind of astounding thing was realizing that, in a sense, I could only really have a career once I took my characters out of a self-contained world, fed them through the internet, fed them through these generalized archetypes, and then re-individualized them. But for some reason, people received that differently. Received that slightly differently than plays that of mine that don't have that that hook to it. Now that I have more of a reputation and there's a much larger group of people who have seen multiple of my plays, I don't have to do that if I don't want to. I also didn't know that I was going to succeed. I didn't know this was a successful formula for making theater in the 2020s at all. It is, but or at least it was, but
it does seem, having kind of reading Dime Square and to a similar extent Zoomers, but perhaps less so in terms of your focus there. There's a kind of strange Ouroboros element of a play that is so much about people alienated from themselves through mimetic culture that itself becomes the kind of meme for people who haven't even seen the play yet. And I was so curious to read in other interviews with you that you joined Twitter in 2020, that you have a flip phone, you don't have Wi-Fi at home, that your relationship with amazing. I when I was working on my novels, I had a flip phone and it was the best time of my life. Now I'm Apple Watch only, which is the halfway step between.
It actually seems pretty good. I buy that.
But I'm curious then to what was the experience of entering Twitter in 2020 like for you, as a kind of, was it an amusement park? Was it a sort of foreign country? Was it a source? Did you know when you kind of experienced it that it would be a source of inspiration? Or was it only later in the process of being interested in people who were themselves self-referential, that the role of
I had no idea. Yeah, I had no idea because I didn't know what it was. I didn't really spend the only time I ever really used Twitter was maybe if I'd like watched I'm a sports fan, so if I'd watched a game and I wanted to see what people were saying about it. Or maybe I would didn't even have an account. Maybe around like elections, the Super Bowl, like it was, I dip in if, for big, I would dip in if someone else told me something else was like a big event and I was like missing this trending event, but I wouldn't be the person to like be the first to see a trending. I was always late to it and I didn't linger long. But so I really didn't know, I didn't know what being on Twitter would do to my brain. But obviously the pandemic, and especially the first 3 to 6 months of the pandemic, were paradigm melting for in every sense. You just there in a unfortunate way, there was nothing else to, there was no other way to, there weren't a lot of options for connecting with people. Or even for, I mean, I felt a deep need to understand, I have felt a deep need to understand what was going on. And so, yeah, I think it occurred to me later that it was a source of inspiration. And I had to kind of drop some of my Luddite romanticism about what could be inspiring. But insofar as like that's social media is part of the texture of life, like, I mean, you'd be a fool not to think of it as relevant material, and not to look at how people are behaving and talking. And then, yeah, I don't stage plays in which people are like avatars of social media. They're real people but presumably my characters are using social media and presumably they're affected by this sense of surveillance. Yeah, so I think it was really critical for helping me create meaningfully modern characters who have internalized this sense of, yeah, self-surveillance, alienation, kind of latent grief for what was, addiction,
So
anxiety. I just read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, so I've been thinking that's a really disturbing book. Which, side note, he writes that what he calls the great rewiring started in 2012. Have you read it?
I've read some of it, Jonathan Haidt, but not The
Yeah.
Anxious.
He says the year that Facebook bought Instagram in 2012, and then the iPhone, he said the original iPhone, he claims it was in some sense closer to a flip phone than we realized. It wasn't until the camera went inside the phone and people could selfie, but particularly teenage girls could selfie, that there was a massive, like, a massive spike in teenage depression, global depression in general, like all of that. Basically, people went on Instagram in particular. Obviously, there are other things, Tinder and DraftKings, and a couple apps are major movers, but Twitter. But I thought of that as the year of the Mayan. There was the 2012 was the Mayan apocalypse, and people were like, "It didn't come, it didn't come, it didn't happen." It's 2013 now, we're fine. But I think maybe that's.
Yes. Now that I hear you talk, I remember. I think I didn't read the book, but I think it was The Atlantic that it was excerpted that I remember
Yeah.
reading. And
It hit me in the
it
grocery
was
store the other day. I was like, the apocalypse did happen.
is it I
World
mean,
didn't.
that article was a major inspiration to go full to do my smartphone shackle instead. So like my phone is sort of locked away charging, and I just get calls and texts redirected. This is only so I can keep the group chats. Otherwise it's the thing I would
Yeah.
miss most. But to return to the sort of I'm curious about is the degree to which sort of the theme or this idea of alienation that is sort of maybe most obvious when we're talking about memes and the sort of self-referentiality of being a member of a particular generation who is brain poisoned and irony pill and all those things. And yet in Diamond Square in particular, because there are characters that are from a variety of different generations, what struck me is even how familiar some of this was to me as a mid-millennial who came of age in the literary scene of New York, and with a completely different set of discursive norms and mimetic norms. But the idea that we were all sort of alienated from ourselves in other ways, maybe not through the internet, but through the sense of constantly being in interpersonal competition with one another, was something that struck me as so painfully familiar. Sidebar, are you familiar at all with the work of Rene Girard?
Yeah, I have a review of his selected writings coming out in Airmail in like 2 weeks or a week.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, I've been thinking about, yeah.
Yes,
So,
so much of
but it
what
wasn't when I wrote Times Square. So that's for whatever
Ah.
that's worth. But now right. So the play is like super Gerardian, right?
yeah, there is there's a sense of mimetic desire that
Yeah.
that it really fascinated me, because even when in Dime Square there's a conversation towards the end of the play that some of the characters are having about and they're all for those of you who have not yet seen it, sort of chasing various kinds of artistic success and clout, often vis-a-vis one another. So it's a kind of social jockeying. And then there's this wonderful monologue about no one really cares about the almost genius. No one talks about the also rans artistically, but it's even then talked about as a kind of dominance. This guy wins. These are the writers that we remember. And I'm curious, as a writer, where you see the role of potential like artistic transcendence. Like, what is it? What is it beyond artistic success as a place in a status hierarchy that makes, let's say the art that you love most, that you think is great? What makes it great independently of the interpersonal dominance of being remembered?
Good question. I mean, that sounds like it's a question out of Aquinas or Plato, as much as out of a Zoom salon. It's an eternal question.
Feel free to answer as personally as you would like. There's
Yeah.
no right answer, but I don't think if there is a right answer, we're probably not going to figure it out. So
No, I'll try to stumble through it. I wish I'd made a pot of coffee before. You know what I need? I'm gonna get a nicotine mint
all
in
right.
like at some point. That's what I really need is a surge of like, man. Yeah, that's such a maybe I should just give an answer for the sake of giving an answer, but I think it's like one of the hardest and deepest things. I'm really partial to a book by John Eliot Gardner called Music in the Castle of Heaven. Do you know that book?
Don't.
Do you know John Eliot Gardner?
Not at all. No.
He's one of the world's great conductors, but he's particularly a choral conductor. He recently was canceled for slapping a violist or something. He's like 84. He like slapped a violist on stage. He's like old school. Or he was like forcibly retired. And then he claimed he was off his meds or something, which is sort of sad. But he's an absolutely wonderful musicologist, conductor, and he wrote this incredible book it's a biography of Bach, like a musical biography, and it walks through Bach's life through his compositions, and looking at how Bach moved from town to town, from church and patron, like how the different social and economic forces that were at play in Bach's life put pressure on his music to take different directions. And also his role as a family man, as a church man, as a Lutheran. And looking at how Bach's music was capable of adapting to these moment by moment social, religious, personal demands, the death of a child, the whims of a rich court guy, the whims of the church, the needs of his students. And while he was recognized as a great organ master and as a kind of fearsome, almost professorial figure, certainly people in his time, people in his time recognized in some cases that there was something special about his music, but he wasn't a rock star. He wasn't Mozart even. And it really wasn't until, I guess it was famously Mendelssohn brushed off was it the St. Matthew's Passion or the Mass in B minor in 1827? I have to double check. It basically, it wasn't until several generations later that his music was represented to German audiences and electrified the country and electrified Europe. This is actually so that to me is a classic. That to me is a work that I don't know what that I don't know what that is. I don't know what but it's obviously something that so ultimately the lesson is all these, Bach wasn't the only person writing for churches. He wasn't the only person who had a lot of children, many of whom died. He wasn't the only deeply pious composer. There are a lot of very pious composers who wrote cliched music, etc. There's a J.M. Coetzee has an essay. He has an essay called "What is a Classic," where he uses this example. He talks about Bach being rediscovered. Now, he wasn't completely forgotten, but he was like a textbook. He was like, if you wanted to learn about a fugue, or if you wanted to learn about a certain technical thing, you'd maybe brush off some Bach. You wouldn't have played or listened to Bach pop in for pleasure until the 1820s or 30s. It's the same as Shakespeare. Obviously, there were a number of playwrights kicking around London, not all of them, many of whom were classically educated country boys, and not all of them became Shakespeare. Only one of them did. I guess great art has, it might just be true that there's only really room for a few artists in an era. Like maybe it's simply that the historical, ecological, theological context in which we all live, they can only be expressed so many times. Like there's a limited amount, there's a number of things you can say about a particular experience of being human, a particular era. And maybe it's true that the number of geniuses is pretty limited, and then secondarily there's a timing aspect. So maybe there was another Shakespeare, but they came a little bit too late to be Shakespeare, and it didn't happen. So I guess great art is kind of an expression of the totality of a historical experience, which is why great art in any literature, film, music, dance, whatever, it's different, and yet it's also feels universal. Obviously, there's no way to compare John Coltrane to Bach musically, but John Coltrane is nearly as universal in jazz as Bach is, and had the same kind of prolificness as well. I know. I guess that I could just. There's a lot I feel like I could.
I sent you an impossible and unfair question,
Yeah.
and I think you sort of. I think that's an incredibly thoughtful answer. It's something I wrestle with all the time. Sort of, one of the weird things about being a novelist and a theologian is that I'm constantly not only like self overhearing and self-criticizing, and then applying kind of my desire for the true and the beautiful and the good to everything I do, which is not a great way to not be neurotic. But
You sound like an Iris Murdoch character, but I guess you went to Oxford, so that's.
Thank you. That is not the first time someone has told me that. But
I think you are an Iris Murdoch character. You are as well. That is Iris Murdoch.
yeah, I mean, just sort of a chaotic novelist. I feel like the problem with Iris Murdoch is that half her novel, or like a third of her novels, are amazing, and 2/3 of them are awful.
Yeah, it's
but
true.
that is a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
But the book that I read, I think just before Times Square, was actually Charles Taylor's new book, Cosmic Connections, which I'm reviewing, and which has sort of got me on this particular rabbit hole even worse. Which is great book, 600 pages, if any of you feel like reading it.
Read A Secular Age, and I've read the other one,
Source of the Self.
Source of the Self, yeah. Source of the Self is awesome.
I mean, they're all great. But Cosmic Connections in particular, it sort of posits in this way that does feel a little bit crypto-Christian, and I'm not sure how it would translate outside of that context, that there is something to great art that is, I won't say involves a particular relationship of the self to reality, that beauty can do, but where you have to kind of posit a degree of beauty being real in some sense, and not just a subjective internal psychological experience. And the reason I'm thinking about that is not just because I'm thinking about that, but vis-a-vis your play, is because there is there seems to be, as a reader of your play, of Diamond Square, and to a lesser extent Zoomer, actually, I think there's perhaps, and you can correct me if this is not true, where there's a sort of nihilism, or let's say a reluctant nihilism to so many of your characters, a sense that the 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 question of great art, or the question of doing something meaningful outside of status games is moot because it's perhaps not even available to them as a possibility.
Yeah.
Do you feel very much that that was something that you were trying to explore in these characters?
Yeah, for sure.
And
I mean, it's funny because I have a few plays that I think outside of the collection and outside of the ones you read, like Morning Journal, for instance, the play that's up now, definitely is, I guess maybe you could categorize my plays as resting on one side or the other of this, the question you're asking, which is, do the characters feel some capacity for transcendence, or have they given up already, whether artistically or spiritually or both? So Morning Journal is maybe after a few years of writing pretty nihilistic place. I felt inspired again to move to the right of that line. And I think prior to the pandemic, I was also looking at writing to the right of that line. But interestingly enough, those plays are a little less popular, which which I find interesting, in the sense that people respond and feel connected more to the kind of hopeless, atomized characters than the ones with souls. But yeah, I mean, we could break down I think the characters in Zoomers and in Dime Square, the Zoomers arguably less so, but Dime Square for sure are absolutely trapped. And the one character in Dime Square, Terry, who's the filmmaker, who I named him in my head after Terrence Malick, and the theory of that character is like, what if you had a modern, like a young Terrence Malick in Dime Square? How would that person be received? If you had someone who was actually pursuing a kind of a formally and aesthetically sublime thing, and how would they move around the room? How would they move around the Coke den, basically? And in the play, the answer is like anxiously, and it breaks them to be there. It kind of destroys them to have to be there. And they can't really forgive themselves for being there, but they also need the network. They need to market they need to maintain their social connections. They need to maintain access. So the whole point of one of the big mimetic rivalries in Dime Square is between Stefan and Terry. Stefan is this younger writer who's written what we'd now think of as like he got a book deal, and then he sold the rights to Netflix, and how he has a show, and Terry's really jealous, and Terry has an indie film that people really admire, but Stefan has the money in the loft, and he might want to hire Terry to direct an episode of his show. And so that might not seem like a plot point, but that plot point actually drives a lot of the play. And then Stefan's also he fucked Terry's ex-girlfriend, and so Terry's like cucked in every sense, and he's tortured by that. But I mean, people laugh at the character. He's like a comic character. I don't think he's taken very seriously by audiences. In a sense, I don't take him that seriously either, because just the gravity of the planet that he's on just reduces his how high he can leap. He's really ground bound by the gravity of the room. And in that context, he's pretty pathetic. So yeah, I think in a lot of ways, Dime Square explores a total sense of hope, like hopelessness about what the marketplace can do for artists, and a total hopelessness and sense of despair about what American culture does to people who have a spark of genius. And I don't think there's a counter argument in the play. I think it's meant to leave you with us. The only counter argument is that you can watch the play and try to be different, or try to think differently. but it definitely condemns that particular moment. I think it is saying that that particular moment was pretty bizarre and unhappy.
And yet I'm curious because reading sort of Times Square and then Zoomers back to back, that it at least as a reader, and I just sort of have, I feel like I have to see it staged to speak with more authority here, or any authority at all. But there is, what struck me was about Zoomers is the way this sort of dance between a nihilism, like a conventional nihilism that's almost like the like unavailable vocabulary, and these attempts to have real or complicated or even transcendence pointing conversations. I think my favorite scene is, so I want to say, it's between Jacob and Finley, this bad,
Jade,
I want to say bad date, a date that could at any point go well,
yeah.
where at different points both characters are sort of throwing each other life raps, maybe the female character more than the male character there, but it's a sort of date that's going a series of unforced errors as these two people get closer and then get further away. And then later in the play, there's another scene that's a bit similar to, in my mind, between two characters in an open relationship who aren't 100% sure what that means.
Based on my own, that scene is totally based on my own
Oh gosh,
relationship
wow.
feeling. So I'm happy to own up to that.
So I guess I'm curious.
Or me a year and a half, or my own relationship circa this last summer. Not now, but
It would, there we go. All right, thanks for clarifying.
yeah.
I guess, how much did you see the kind of vocabulary? I'm trying to figure out how to frame this question. It seems like you're doing something different. Are you sort of, again, the word consciously perhaps is not the most useful word here, but in terms of Zoomers versus Times Square, in terms of two different approaches to the world and worlds of the play even, why are these characters vulnerable in this particular way, and what are they looking for?
I think some of it does reflect the change. I guess to be honest, the two plays, there's a gap. I guess Dimes was written in the fall of 21 and Zoomers was written in the fall of 23. So and then they were both staged. I guess Zoomers was summer, late summer, fall, whatever. But about 2 years apart. I mean, I think some of it is just the mood. The mood in 2021 was like, the city was shut down and you really only could go hang out at that guy's loft. Like the only exciting thing to do was to go hang out with a bunch of rival, like literary world and like art world and film world people and hope they don't talk shit about you and hope you can stop yourself from talking shit about them and everyone trying to sleep with everyone and everyone. It really was a small, I mean, I guess I never thought of this actually, but now that you're asking the question, now that I have some hindsight, or now that I have the advantage of hindsight, I can see that Dimes was really influenced by how little there was to do and how your social world was circumscribed by who was willing to go outside, by who was still left in New York City, and partially by this explosion of money. There was an explosion of money that was flowing through, new money, crypto, tech. There were new patrons, there were new patron networks, there were a lot of new literary magazines. There were new people interested in investing. I didn't really have investors for Dime Square, but there were a lot of tech people who threw a lot of money down on drinks and on, like, they were like willing to pay higher ticket prices. And so you did have to kind of you had to go to these parties because if you wanted to make something, you had to firm up your support with the royal court. And that left me, that I'm not someone who's particularly well equipped personally to do that. I can do that, but it leaves me just like really sick. And I felt like a kind of vertigo for a long time. I can see that better now in hindsight. And in Zoomers, I think I was writing about people who had just moved to New York And we're trying to figure out their lives, and they have more hope because they might be from a hopeless generation in the Jonathan Haidt sense of they might be from the anxious, not hopeless, but they're from the anxious generation, but they're not from the hopeless generation, I should say. And so one of the major questions of that play is just, can these characters overcome their insane wiring, this nearly hardwired anxiety, and become people? So for that reason, I think they can get out of the room. In that place set in Bushwick, and there's a greater sense of there being a world outside of them. Yeah, and then the different dating scenes. So one trick in the play is in the Finley Jacob scene. Jacob says, to paraphrase, he basically says, "Love is an illusion, and people just get old. And if you get married, you're stuck with just an old person." And then in the millennial boyfriend scene, they say they love each other, and he says, well, that's love is for turning young people and old people together. And so there's intentional symmetry between those two scenes. One's in the first act, one's in the second act. That the first scene, Jacob, even though Jacob's not a stupid character, he is addicted to video games, and he said he went to Brown, but he's not going anywhere with his life, but he's stuck. He's stuck, even despite his own capacity for more, he's stuck being only able to see someone as a body and only able to see himself as a body. And he's trapped in this weirdly hyper-rational view of love without any religious pathos. And then in the second scene, the millennial boyfriend, he's not inherently a better person than Jacob. And in fact, he is sleeping around, and he's very open about it. And he says, I've been a shithead up until recently. So he's not morally superior in any way, but he's finally, simply maybe because he's older, he's able to make a commitment. He's not in like a Hallmark sense, but in a existential sense, he's able to feel the sting of death, and he's able to embrace that and say, I don't want to walk away from something just because I'm afraid of death and aging. I don't want to walk away from something because we're not going to be young and beautiful forever. And realizing that he can't go his whole life without ever feeling like he's taken that risk. So yeah, I mean, I think maybe, yeah, so Zoomers were Dime Square is maybe about how we are the internet and there's no outside, and Zoomers is how the internet's gotten inside of us, but we can get it out. And so that is maybe a good way of looking at those two plays.
So before I ask a couple of my final questions, some housekeeping notes. If all of you who are watching do have questions and want to start putting them in the chat, now would be a great time to start doing that. In about let's say after my next question, I'll turn it over to you all, and then ask a few more if we run out of audience Q&A. So do start thinking about the best way to formulate whatever questions you have. But in the meantime, back to you, Matt. Something that I'm really curious about in other interviews that you've talked about is the way, and you've talked about this a little bit in this interview as well, in terms of your band background and the degree to which some of your writing process is collaborative, that you do write characters for people that you know, or that there is a kind of interplay between inspiration, knowledge of people, and a desire to kind of either base characters on them or write characters for them. What is that sort of on a granular level? What is that process just like? Is it taking down what people say? Is it a kind of conversation based? Is there improvisation? How do you create a character out of a person that you know, or with a person that you know?
Well, I do it all. Yeah, I definitely do it all the time. I have a pretty natural ability to like just listen to someone talk and then kind of simulate how they would be, outside of the circumstances I find them in. I don't mean that I can do like an exact verisimilitude thing. I'm not exactly parroting someone, but I think I usually have really deep intuitions about who people are and how they think. And um I think of it more as I take that sample of a person and it's not always just one person, but and I can like put that sample in a chess match with another sample. It might be two very dissimilar people who don't normally interact, but I understand how this person plays the game, so to speak, and I understand how this person, and I mean largely actors that I'm writing for. So I think I create like facsimile copies of their personas, and then I can game them. That's how I've started to understand how I do what I do. Now, in some cases, I write about people I don't like, and they don't know I'm writing about them, and they don't know they're not actors, and I'm borrowing their personas because I want to comment on them. Of course, I never name, I'm my goal is for no one to really know, but yeah. So a lot of it turns on. So I think as I've gotten more established and I have a more established group of people that I work with, the actors in my company really, or that I work regularly with, they absolutely know when I'm writing to their voice versus when I'm giving them a role that I've written for someone else or written at a different time in my life. But yeah, it's a hard thing to describe, but I think what writing for, and there's not a lot of collaboration, I should say. I don't really ask for people's opinions. I would say Christian Lorentzen in Dimes, and then in a few other plays. I mean, he's a literary critic, so I think he's probably the person who most insisted on having some kind of veto over what his character is saying to a degree, or sending me suggestions, or that's sort of one major exception. Now, of course, people will ad lib and riff on things in rehearsals, and I'll put that in. But for the most part, I'm asking people to like trust me with this weird process of recreating them into someone who's the same but different. So it's like, yeah, so the actors have to be a little bit tough-minded because I sometimes have the characters who I based on them say things that are uncomfortable or vulnerable or unflattering, but I also do that with the me characters. So I think it's a kind of lead by example. Like if there's a character who I'm drawing from my own experience or who obviously resembles me, I absolutely make sure that they are not uniquely valorous or special. Yeah, it that's always the trick of theater, is that you're always like on the border of reality, but you never really cross it. So you have a lot of freedom to actually speak in a play. I can communicate to people through writing for them in ways that I could never communicate them to their face. I couldn't say some of those things in a text message, but if I write a character who says those things, I can in a way be honest with them about themselves, and it's a lot more peaceful actually than if I were like, here's why I think you blew up that relationship, or here's why I think. So I think it's a kind of gentle, it's a gentle process of um, borrowing other people's vulnerabilities and psychology. And some people hate me for it. I mean, some people think it's really horrible that I do this, but I mean, most people who I think know me and work in the plays know that it's consensual. Unless someone really pisses me off and they're really a bastard, then I will just kind of put something based on them in the play. But again, I'm not going to identify them in the play. So yeah. It's
No,
risky. In other words, it's a risky, kind of messy process, but I think I've gotten better at it. So
I have run afoul of basing characters on people a few times in earlier
Yeah.
novels. I think my first novel was probably the worst offender, and I think perhaps
Wow.
I've gotten more tactful rather than doing it less in my borrowing. But I'm not
Yeah.
sure. So this question is from Adam. It's for both of us. Great. I'm on the spot too. In what ways do we think that a narrative form is better able to chronicle culture, quote unquote, than scholarly argument? What consumers tell us about culture that a book like Heights, The Anxious Generation can't? Over to you.
Can you read that to me one more time? I just want to make sure I'm
Oh,
answering
in
it.
what way, it's also in the chat. In
Yeah.
what way
Oh, yeah.
do you think a narrative form is better able to chronicle culture than scholarly argument? What consumers
Oh,
tell
yeah.
us about culture,
Okay. Yeah.
Jonathan Haidt's book can?
Yeah. Great. Well, my sense would be that this is kind of a lame answer, but the people aren't statistics, so there are many shades. So Haidt's book can tell you that teen girl suicide is way up, and it can tell you that boys are underperforming in school, and it can tell you that they're driving less and having less sex and drinking less actually and vaping more, and it can tell you facts. This is sort of it's a philosophical question, but it shows you that I think that these characters, they have an existential, you can answer, I think it's almost theological in that characters are people and people have souls, and like it's a question of whether you think we're all reducible to statistics. And I think a play or any kind of work of imaginative writing can show you that we exist within we exist statistically, but then we also exist existentially. And so, yeah, I do have the characters who are really anxious about sex and Zoomers, and they're really anxious about, they can't keep a job and they're on TikTok, but they also have thoughts and feelings, and they have deeper ideas about their own reality. So.
Inclined to agree. I'm of course I'm gonna say it's theological. I mean, that one's a give me on my perspective. But I mean, I think what's always sort of interesting to me is there was a time where I did think that sort of writing novels meant creating a world or trying to kind of realistically create a world when I was much younger. And I think I know, at least I don't think that's true of any art form, certainly, but certainly not true of the novel, even though the novel perhaps claims to be. And there is a sort of strangeness in realizing that what you're presenting to a reader is a kind of encounter. It's not a recreation of reality. It is a sort of direction of attention to particular elements of it that both feel real and convey hopefully something that is true. But the way, like, what is being you cannot just like say a true thing or create a true world and have it translate. It is like it's an encounter between, at least for me, between a writer and a reader, where as a novelist I'm in very limited time and very limited space attempting to present sort of some contradictory, strange aspects of a human person in a setting that reflects that, with language that intensifies that, where the sort of unlikely confluence of all of those things creates some kind of encounter. And I think that that's something that sort of poetic language does perhaps best. The novel does uneasily, sort of sitting between poetry and you know, propositional prose. But there is something that can be like I think that there has to be perhaps the underlying assumption, maybe this is a theological assumption, that there are things that are better said non-literally, or things that cannot be conveyed propositionally. And I think, you know, once you grant that, then suddenly an encounter between a writer and a reader, or between, I don't even say a playwright and an audience, but because there's so many other layers of mediators there between everyone involved in a play and the audience. I imagine there is a kind of something is conveyed that is more interesting than, though not sort of entirely orthogonal to, a set of assumptions or statements about reality. You know, Zoomers are not having sex, being an example there. So no, that was my turn to meander a little bit. Other questions
Feels
from,
good, doesn't it?
and I thought I could get through this whole interview without, you know, dishing it out and not taking it. So short question from Eloy. What instrument and what type of music? This must be early being in a
Yeah,
band.
I in high school I played, like in college I played keyboards, and you know, it was 2006 and 7 and 8 and 9, so I definitely wanted to be Radiohead or Animal Collective, or, you know, it's like indie era. But I wrote most of my music on the piano and then sometimes on guitar, but I haven't played guitar in a long time, but piano I can still play.
Do you still perform or do you still write?
No. I'm still interested in writing songs, but I not to perform them myself for sure. I've learned that was still at a time in my life where I didn't know I could be backstage.
Any in a musical ever?
Sorry?
Would you ever write a musical?
I was commissioned to work on one as a lyricist, not a very good commission a couple years ago, and with a very talented Juilliard composer, but the person who was paying us not only underpaid us, but I think had a really just extremely, he wanted something that I think I was never commercially that wasn't, I didn't really, and I also think I need to write with the piano, so it didn't really make a lot of sense. The composer kept wanting things in units of, you know, ABAB, and I my brain just did not want to write that. It was not, it was interesting, but I think I'd have to write a weird musical on the piano and my own style. I definitely am not going to be a conventional Broadway lyricist. That's unfortunately not my fate. I don't have a talent for that, but
Eloy, you're raising your hand. Another question? I got
yes, Tara, thank you for setting this up. This has been great. I just wanted to hear about Matthew's influences in terms of what prompted you to be like, what were your, like, first you mentioned movies, like what movies were the ones that you actually saw that made you think about becoming a playwright? And
yeah, that's
in
easy.
turn,
Oh yeah, oh no, do you want to finish the question or?
no, yeah, and the things about other like literary influences. I have, like, I'm gonna get your book soon. I haven't seen your plays, but this has been really great. Like, this is I see that just from like hearing you, like there's so much depth into what you are doing that it's just uh it's great.
Thank
Just
you. Yeah. And I should plug, there's going to be a Zoomer, there's going to be a new collection next spring through the same play publisher, Applause. So that'll be Zoomers and then the 3 other plays I've written in the last year. So yeah, I'm excited about that too. But yeah, thank you for that. And it's true that I bite the bullet on trying to write characters who I think, well, actually one of the big points of growth for me as a playwright, this isn't about my influence, but it's just about my technique, was writing characters who don't need to show off and don't need to let everyone know that they were a philosophy student. I mean, my characters are still pretty literate in some cases, but it was very freeing to like start to cut out like my notes from grad school and my notes from, like, it's a cut out and separate my own thought patterns from my characters and let them just say okay, or let them say I need to take a shit, or like and letting them speak in a colloquial way that wasn't constantly burdened with like a lyrical or philosophical debt. But I think in terms of film, I think Bergman was a huge influence, and I think Romer. I mean, there are obviously a lot of filmmakers I really love, and Woody Allen to a degree. I think there are a lot of filmmakers I love who are less verbal, but Richard Linklater's another. I mean, I think I probably watched Before Sunset and Sunrise 10 or 15 times a piece. So there aren't a ton of movies that have play-like dialogue at a high level. And I don't really think movies need to have that. I don't think that's necessarily the main pattern of the main thing that movies do well, but there are a few filmmakers who do write play-like dialogue or dialogue that could be staged or that have could viably influence a playwright. So, but I think Bergman is the biggest. I mean, I think the extreme psychological collisions and that happen, and the sense of that you have modern people who are being stripped down to a sense of desperation and isolation in a really ruthless and psychologically insightful way. That was a huge that was a huge source of artistic provocation for me. And I think Vermeer secondarily writes about like the bourgeoisie problems in a way that in the way that people lie to themselves, but while maintaining their lives and going on. So Vermeer doesn't have these like crazy collisions like Bergman does, where characters are shattered and broken. He's not Scandinavian. But I think Vermeer also showed me how to write about ideas through characters without having the characters become mouthpieces. Woody Allen certainly for like the sense of New Yorkness and how you can write urban American characters. I'm sure I'm forgetting. I mean, there are a lot of witty movies. Of course, I'm cutting out witty movies. And they'll come to me. But maybe, I mean, 8.5 is one of my favorite movies, so I think that's in some ways influenced Dime Square in particular, like the sense of art characters with big egos, artistic director figures who are falling apart. I don't know. I could keep going. Again, there are a lot of small influences, but I think at a young age, I understood that I would rather watch the best movies than drag myself out to see third-rate plays. I felt that there was a quality control with the Criterion Collection that I wasn't going to get with theater, which isn't means tested. Theater's a big risk. You just don't. It's addicting because it's a big risk, but you truly can't be sure what you're going to get night to night. So.
Other questions?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Oh, did I cut you off, Matthew?
No, that's it. I think there aren't any more left.
Oh, yeah, I just didn't know if anyone wants to raise their hand. If not, I'm gonna ask my final couple.
Okay.
So I'm guessing sort of this is a nice segue into my last question, which is about the theater industry right now. You've obviously sort of come to develop a career outside of particular sort of maybe quote unquote obvious institutional pathways. And I'm curious, sort of your general sense of what are the broad strokes trends you're seeing in the more mainstream theater industry right now, as well as in other maybe like non-traditional or outside non-institutional pathways, at least in New York. What's working, what's not working, what do you want to avoid? What would you like to see more of?
Yeah, there's in Broadway, off Broadway, there's a lot of like flash cutting, a lot of light design that I think unconsciously simulates TV and TikTok, and like there's a trend of like quick blackout and then there's a reset and everything looks different. Bigger production shows are really dominated by design. It seems like a lot of money. When a show has money, it goes into high concept design. I'm certainly not an expert on like contemporary Broadway theater. I mean, there are people who care about this, and I don't. But of course, now one of the nice things about being on the map is you get invited to things and you get to see other shows. And I thought The Hunt at St. Anne's, which is actually based on a movie, was quite good. That was probably the best thing I've seen off Broadway in a while. But even that, I think it was based on a movie. It had a lot of cinematic effects and a lot of short scenes. And I think that's a really like that film and the adaptation are really powerfully and really powerful, and the lead performance was incredible. But yeah, there's a sense that like that it wasn't, even then I felt that The Hunt wasn't really fully tapping into the power of drama, which is to have longer scenes in which characters can really develop and ideas can really develop and conflicts can really develop rather than just clipping along. Yeah, so I think the big trend is kind of loose collage plays that feel like you're scrolling, or feel like you're watching several episodes slung together. And I don't know if there's a lot of great mainstream playwriting that has the start to finish that the features of a whatever a classic play is. Like again, now maybe some older playwrights. I saw Leopoldstadt, like Tom Stoppard can still do that, but even then, I mean, even Leopoldstadt was a vignette play, which felt very cinematic. I haven't seen any Baker's most recent plays. Yeah, a contemporary, I guess, but there are good plays out. I should say there are good plays out there, but I'm not fully seeing them. And yeah, it does seem like a lot of mainstream theater is just kind of recreating film and TV or TikTok even. And then indie theater is influenced by me. I'll be honest, like the Brooklyn scene, I see a lot of Dime Square light. I mean the off Broadway scene. I don't mean, I'm not going to take credit for 99.8% of theater, but there's a subset certainly of like Brooklyn down and lower Manhattan plays that are totally coming out of Dime Square and Zoomers and are self-advertising as living room plays. In some cases, they're selling themselves as alternate, like explicitly selling themselves as alternates to me and to my theater company. And so yeah, I think the hyper real, ultra contemporary Girardian indie play is having an extended moment, although it's not a lot of people write about it, so it's also maybe not relevant outside of New York, but yeah.
Right. And my last question, where and when can we next see one of your plays?
You can see Morning Journal this weekend, or you can see there's an older play of mine called This Time, which is up on Thursday and Friday. I won't be there myself. And then Morning Journal, which is kind of our lead show right now, my new show, is up Saturday, Sunday. And that's at
What
the
time on?
Brooklyn.
I'm up with the,
7:30.
sorry?
7:30.
Oh man, I can't make it. I am very sorry to hear that, but I mean, I'm happy that it is happening.
Yeah.
And do you have links available such that I could drop them in the chat?
Yeah, if you just quickly search Brooklyn Center for Theater Research, let me see if I can chat them to you really quick.
Matthew, bring your play to DC.
You know, I've been talking about it with someone there, so it's possible.
And I am upstate with the Bruderhof, which is this weekend, or I would
Oh, it's too
be
bad.
very happy to. But I will be hanging out with Christian communitarians playing folk music, so don't feel too sorry for me. But I'm sorry to miss it. I'm really wanted to see Morning Journal, but let me know if it is.
It'll be back. It'll be back.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Matthew, for your time. Thank you all so much for being here and your great questions. And hope to see some of you at the next Interintellect Salon. I believe the next one I'm doing is July 9th with Nicolette Polak on her new novel, Bitter Water Opera. Have a great rest of your evening, everybody.
Thanks. See you guys.